The core of spiritual philosophy presents a fundamental challenge to the materialist view of existence, asserting with conviction that the cessation of physical life is not an abrupt, silent vanishing, but the initiation of an intricate, meticulously coordinated cosmic process. The moment the physical heart halts and medical practitioners pronounce clinical death, the cold finality accepted by human science is merely the starting bell for a profound, transformative spiritual event. Spiritual revelation, transmitted through reliable channels, unveils the illusion that the spirit instantly departs upon the final breath, demonstrating instead that the soul's great passage is chronologically precise and unfolds over a critical duration. 3 minutes and 14 seconds. This narrow window is where the final, decisive act of detachment occurs, a span of time that is both terrifying and utterly fascinating, determining the immediate condition of the spirit in the afterlife. The entire script of our mortal existence hinges upon the nature of this transition, and understanding the minute-by-minute mechanism of these 194 precious seconds fundamentally alters how we perceive life, death, and the imperishable nature of consciousness itself. It is the beginning of the soul's liberation, a precise and complex process orchestrated by universal laws that will make the newly departed spirit shout with recognition or bewilderment. The immediate aftermath of cardiac arrest constitutes the first decisive minute, a period marked not by unconsciousness, but by a state of intense hyper-awareness unparalleled in earthly life. Despite the failure of the vital organs, the soul finds itself more conscious than ever, caught in a paradoxical state of clinical separation and violent energetic attachment. The key to this attachment lies in the fluidic cord, often described in spiritual teachings as a semi-material, invisible umbilical cord of cosmic energy. This cord is the last pulsating anchor of the spirit, a vital link that connects the ethereal body, the perispirit, to the physical molecules it once animated. During this initial 60 seconds, the soul has its perceptive faculties perfectly intact, even amplified. It hears every sound with crystalline clarity, the desperate voices of family, the whispered prayers, the final agonizing flatline of the hospital monitor. The spirit is the ultimate, powerless spectator, often experiencing the sensation of floating slightly above the body, held fast by that resilient fluidic thread. The horror of this minute stems from the agonizing inability to communicate or control the body. The spirit will shriek, attempt to push or try to move a finger. But the physical machine, once a loyal servant of thought, is now inert, unresponsive to the electric will of its master. This is the moment of absolute, instinctive despair, especially if the death was sudden and unexpected. The soul, driven by the ingrained habit of physical existence, attempts desperately to re-enter the body, pushing against an invisible barrier. This instinct is a primordial magnetic reaction, a profound refusal to accept the brutal finality of the biological failure. The spirit realizes it is trapped, conscious but utterly impotent, hovering near the wreckage of its physical life. This lingering presence and the hyperacuity of the spirit's senses during this crucial minute are precisely why experiences of near-death are often reported with such startling vividness and detail, because the soul was not unconscious but fully present, witnessing its own departure process with terrifying lucidity, still tethered to the physical world by the cord's powerful magnetic pull. The fluidic cord itself is not a simple string, but a complex bundle of magnetic and electrical energy that ensures the alignment and cohesion of the perispirit with the physical body throughout life. Its strength and elasticity are determined by the individual's spiritual refinement and lifestyle. In the unprepared, material-minded spirit, this link is thick, robust, and heavily magnetized to the dense molecular structure of the flesh, making the separation a wrenching, protracted affair, like pulling out a deeply rooted anchor. For the one experiencing this minute, it is a conflict between the profound reality of conscious survival and the brutal, humiliating realization that the primary tool for interaction, the body, has been irrevocably taken away. The desperate, silent fight to return is the last tragic affirmation of the spirit's attachment to the gross materiality it is about to leave behind, solidifying this first minute as a crucible of shock, helplessness, and the ultimate acknowledgement of biological defeat, yet spiritual survival. The commencement of the second minute spanning from the 60th to the 120th second, marks the true beginning of the liberation process, often referred to as the perispiritual release. Having passed the point of no return where reanimation would be biologically feasible, the universal mechanism accelerates the detachment. This is when the perispirit, the ethereal body that serves as the essential mold and vehicle for the soul, begins to definitively pull away from the dense, molecular confines of the physical envelope. This separation is described not as a sudden jolt, but as a progressive, emergent process, likened to a delicate light slowly separating itself from the physical form. The spirit begins to experience a startling and profound sensation of lightness, a feeling that replaces the weight and density it has known for an entire lifetime. This progressive detachment brings with it immense, immediate relief. For those who endured decades of chronic pain, debilitating sickness, or constant physical exhaustion in their earthly lives, the second minute is a gale of fresh air after a long immersion. The sensation of physical pain begins to recede, not instantly, but gradually transforming into a distant, muted echo. This relief is explained by the laws of spiritual physics. The perispirit, being composed of a subtle, ethereal substance, is no longer subject to the friction, inertia, and coarse vibrations of dense matter that cause physical affliction. As the magnetic attraction between the two bodies weakens, the soul shrugs off the burden of biological suffering. The process is one of profound physiological relief, but it is also a moment of intense reorientation. The spiritual body, the vehicle for the soul, is now asserting its independence, initiating a change that is visually and physically undeniable to the spirit itself, preparing it for the profound sensory expansion that accompanies true liberation. This phase is critical because it forces the spirit to start accepting its new condition. The magnetic forces that bound the perispirit to the physical matter are systematically being neutralized by the action of specialized spiritual forces or by the natural weakening of the cord. If the soul had prepared itself through moral refinement and detachment from material goods during life, the perispirit itself is of a lighter, more rarefied composition, making the process smooth and harmonious, like gently slipping out of a robe. If the spirit was heavily addicted to material life, the perispirit is denser, the magnetic attraction stronger, and the separation is therefore more drawn out, sometimes accompanied by phantom sensations of tearing or agonizing slowness. This minute, therefore, is a direct reflection of the life lived. A soul invested in higher thought experiences gentle relief, while a soul chained to the sensual and material will experience a sluggish, reluctant separation from the matter it so cherished, clinging painfully to the last vestiges of its earthly sensation. As the spiritual body begins its definitive separation during the second minute, the spirit's perceptive faculties are dramatically expanded beyond the veil of the flesh. This is the stage where the consciousness gains a vision that is no longer restricted by the limitations of the material eye. The soul begins to perceive the true vibrational reality of the universe, capturing colors and tonalities of light that have absolutely no corresponding name or existence within the human visual spectrum. Spiritual mentors reveal that these are the first dazzling perceptions of the true spiritual landscape, where light itself is saturated with meaning, energy, and information. The perispirit's sensory organs, composed of subtle matter, can register the delicate and powerful energies that form the tapestry of the spiritual world, a world composed of frequencies far beyond the meager slice of the spectrum visible on Earth. Simultaneous with this revolutionary visual expansion is an exponential increase in mental clarity and acuity. Throughout earthly life, the physical brain acts as both a tool and a filter, restricting the vast power of the spirit to conform to biological capacity. At this point of separation, that restricting filter is lifted. It is likened to a heavy fog dissipating from the mind. The spirit begins to think with a lucidity, capacity for complex reasoning, and swiftness that it never once experienced while bound by the body. All the mental confusion, the limitations of earthly fatigue, and the physiological constraints that slowed thought are completely swept away. The soul is now operating in its true ethereal element, accessing its innate spiritual intellect. This sudden, profound enlightenment allows the spirit to grasp concepts and connections that were abstract or baffling just moments before. The capacity for profound thought is directly related to the newly acquired spiritual sight. The spirit not only sees its surroundings, but perceives the auras and the vibrational states of the entities and objects around it. The spirit may now see the subtle forms of thought matter, the emanations of energy from the living, and the spiritual presences nearby. This expansion is often shocking to the unprepared. They may struggle to integrate this influx of new, overwhelming sensory information, momentarily confusing the spiritual reality with their lingering attachment to the material one. However, for the prepared, this lucidity is a welcomed awakening, confirming the teachings they accepted in life, that the reality they perceived through the physical senses was but a fleeting shadow of the majestic, eternal reality now unfolding before them, reinforcing the truth that the soul is primarily an entity of light, thought, and subtle energy, now free from its clumsy, heavy biological prison. A cornerstone of spiritual teachings is the absolute guarantee that no soul faces the crossing alone. As the second minute advances, coinciding with the increasing vibrational clarity and sensory expansion, the deep, instinctive feeling of solitude is broken by the gentle arrival of spiritual assistance. These are not random ghosts, but highly organized and benevolent presences, often taking the form of subtle outlines or luminous figures near the departing spirit. These include specialized spiritual rescuers, often described as paramedics of the higher planes, family members who have previously departed, and the ever-present personal spiritual guides or mentors. They are not there to aggressively manifest, but to create a profound field of love and tranquil energy around the transitioning spirit, stabilizing the perispirit and facilitating the ongoing magnetic separation. The spiritual rescuers, possessing a deep understanding of the subtle forces at play, often arrive even before clinical death is declared, positioning themselves strategically around the physical body to counteract the forces of confusion and panic. Their primary goal is to minimize the trauma of the detachment and to ensure the most harmonious separation possible, working to gently disengage the lingering magnetic threads of the fluidic cord. The presence of departed loved ones is a meticulously orchestrated grace. While they may hold back from an immediate aggressive manifestation to avoid shocking the still confused spirit, their waves of unconditional love and recognition are intensely felt. This feeling of being surrounded by profound familiar affection often serves as the first emotional anchor for the departing soul, providing an immense, immediate relief and a surge of confidence that they are safe and welcomed. It is typically in this minute that the soul, now functioning more effectively through its perispirit, makes its first spiritual communication attempt. While the physical body remains silent, the soul's thoughts and emotional state become powerfully communicative in the ethereal realm. The phenomenon reported by living family members at the bedside, a sudden intense feeling of presence, an overwhelming wave of affection, or the perception of a whisper, is often a direct result of the spirit's desperate, nascent effort to reach out through the thought matter of its new vehicle. The presence of the personal guide is paramount. This mentor, having accompanied the soul through its entire earthly journey, knows its exact psychological and spiritual state and can offer precisely the tailored emotional and energetic support required at this crucial moment, gently preparing the soul for the profound self-assessment awaiting it in the final minute, reinforcing the fact that the universe never abandons its children in their moment of greatest fragility. The final pivotal minute of the initial transition, from 120 to 194 seconds, is dedicated to the most transformative event, the cinema of consciousness. This is not a judgment rendered by an external deity, but the soul's own moment of instantaneous moral assessment, facilitated by its newly acquired lucidity and spiritual perspective. Prepare for an unfiltered, complete, and simultaneous review of the life just concluded. The spirit does not see its life as a chronological film strip played at high speed, but as a dense, explosive download of multidimensional data. Every action, thought, intention, and word, from the most noble act of charity to the most fleeting, hidden, malicious thought, is instantaneously re-experienced. The key to this review is not mere recollection, but profound comprehension. The soul not only sees what it did, but simultaneously perceives the consequences and ripple effects of those actions upon the lives of others. For the first time, the spirit fully understands the pain it caused, the joy it inspired, the opportunities for growth it squandered, and the essential lessons it stubbornly refused to learn. The soul becomes aware of the complex network of connections it participated in, seeing the purpose behind events that seemed meaningless or unjust during its physical existence. It is forced to confront its own behavioral patterns and moral choices with a clarity that is both brutal and profoundly humbling. The enlightenment provided by the perispirit's freedom from the dense physical filter allows the spirit to see itself from a completely new vantage point, a perspective of detached yet compassionate truth. The experience is an absolute moral inventory, a mirror held up to the true self. What is extraordinary is that the soul does not judge itself with the severity and prejudice of human society. Instead, the review is conducted with a sense of clear, compassionate understanding, accepting that every experience, even the most agonizing error, served the purpose of spiritual growth and evolution. The soul understands its own trajectory, its victories, and its failures within the grand eternal scheme of its development. This self-assessment is the ultimate lesson in personal responsibility, proving the spiritual law that we are the sole architects of our destiny and our suffering. This panoramic vision fundamentally and irreversibly changes the spirit's perspective on its earthly life, replacing all the ego, confusion, and fear with a profound, serene understanding of its true, eternal self, preparing it for the final, definitive separation. The deep comprehension achieved during the cinema of consciousness immediately leads to a state of evolutionary clarity. Having witnessed the entire tapestry of its recent existence, the soul now possesses a raw, unadulterated awareness of its next needs for growth. The ego and self-deception that characterized life in the flesh are stripped away, allowing the spirit to see precisely which moral shortcomings, which stubborn defects of character must be eliminated, and which new experiences and challenges must be programmed for future incarnations. This clarity is not received as a celestial command, but as an innate, undeniable truth arising from the depths of its own conscience. The spirit understands its current position on the ladder of evolution with crystalline precision. This moment of clarity is crucial because it transforms the spirit from a bewildered newcomer into a conscious, responsible participant in its own destiny. The soul exits the cinema of consciousness with an absolute understanding of who it is, what it has achieved, and what remains to be conquered on the path to perfection. This is why spirits who communicate soon after the transition often display a serenity, wisdom, and understanding that deeply shocks their still living family members. They have passed through the refining fire of the panoramic vision, and their perspective on the ephemeral nature of earthly life has changed forever. Their priorities are realigned, their attachments to material possessions severed, and their focus fixed solely on the eternal values of love, knowledge, and moral progress. Furthermore, this evolutionary clarity instantly provides the spirit with an initial blueprint for the future. It sees which of its accrued virtues grant it immediate opportunities for service, study, or rest in the spiritual plane. It understands the necessity of future trials, recognizing that painful experiences are not punishments, but necessary lessons designed by its own higher self to root out lingering imperfections. This self-directed planning ensures that every spirit, upon completing its transition, is equipped with a fundamental, compelling sense of purpose and direction. The spirit, no longer operating under the delusion of linearity, understands that its life was but a single, purposeful chapter in an infinite book of experiences, ready to embark on the next phase of its cosmic education with newfound courage and wisdom, armed with the undeniable truth of its eternal nature and its specific role in the grand universal design. Precisely at the 3 minutes and 14 seconds mark, the initial cycle of the spiritual transition achieves its most decisive culmination. This is the exact moment of the definitive rupture, where the fluidic cord, that final resilient strand of energetic connection that has tethered the perispirit to the physical matter, is completely and irrevocably severed. This act marks the moment when death becomes absolute, not only biologically but spiritually. From this point, the physical body is truly and completely abandoned, and all hope of reincorporation through simple instinct is gone. The spiritual source reveals that this final separation is not accompanied by pain or trauma. but rather by a sensation likened to a spiritual birth. Just as the cutting of the biological umbilical cord inaugurates the infant's life in the physical realm, the cutting of the fluidic cord marks the spirit's definitive entry into the luminous reality of the spiritual world. The sensation experienced by the soul is one of ultimate release and transcendent freedom. It is an overwhelming feeling of lightness, often compared to finally shedding a heavy, constrictive garment that had been worn for decades. The soul is now completely free of the friction, heaviness, and limitations inherent in dense matter. The magnetic forces that bound the two bodies have been entirely neutralized, and the spirit is now fully governed by the laws of the ethereal dimension. This rupture is crucial because it marks the complete loss of the ability to perceive or influence the physical world through the normal human senses. Before the cut, the spirit could still hear and, in some cases, feel the lingering echoes of the body's pain. Afterward, these perceptions cease entirely, and the spirit's consciousness becomes fully focused and absorbed by the dynamics, sights, and sounds of the spiritual plane. The moment of the rupture is often subtly felt by those attending the dying. Many sensitive individuals or family members report a distinct change in the atmosphere of the room, a palpable sense that something great and final has happened, precisely coinciding with this final energetic separation. This feeling is the dissipation of the localized magnetic field created by the detachment process. The finality of this moment brings immense relief, even if it carries the weight of eternal separation from the physical form. The analogy of releasing a balloon that one has held tightly for a long time perfectly captures the feeling. It is not a sensation of loss or defeat, but one of soaring relief, profound peace, and the joyous knowledge that the long apprenticeship in the physical world has concluded, making way for the magnificent existence that lies ahead, governed by light and love. The 3 minutes of transition are highly individualized, and their smoothness or turbulence is a direct reflection of the soul's preparation and the manner of its departure. The teachings of the spiritual masters meticulously detail how different types of death yield radically different 3-minute experiences. In the case of a natural death, anticipated through advanced age or prolonged illness, the transition is often described as smooth and harmonious. The soul, having time to contemplate its impending release, mentally and morally prepares itself, which naturally causes the fluidic cord to weaken and attenuate gradually throughout the final weeks. The 3 minutes flow like a quiet, peaceful music, and the separation is gentle, with the spirit often departing fully conscious and serene, immediately recognizing the presence of its welcoming party. Conversely, a sudden death due to an accident, unexpected heart attack, or tragedy results in a chaotic, turbulent 3 minutes. The soul is entirely unprepared, yanked violently from its physical life, and enters a state of profound shock and confusion. The fluidic cord, being robust and fully magnetized, offers fierce resistance to the process of separation, causing the 3 minutes to feel subjectively elongated and agonizing. The spirit may linger in confusion, refusing to acknowledge its death, until the full force of the cinema of consciousness finally breaks through the delusion. However, the most agonizing scenario is presented by suicide. The spiritual teachings explain that because the life process was interrupted by an act of violent will, the fluidic cord does not naturally weaken or detach. It is brutally, forcefully severed. This creates a painful, persistent, and unnatural bond between the spirit and the body's residual energy, often trapping the tormented soul in a localized space between the two worlds for days or even weeks, suffering an intense anguish until specialized long-term spiritual intervention can facilitate the eventual painful liberation. In cases of violent death, such as murder or extreme trauma, specialized spiritual emergency teams are dispatched instantly. They work to accelerate the liberation process by creating a kind of spiritual anesthesia, shielding the soul from the psychological shock and trauma of the violent end. For children's death, the transition is often singularly beautiful. Small children offer no complex moral resistance. Their 3 minutes flow like a pure, loving dance, with specialized angelic spirits present from the first second, guaranteeing a transition marked by total innocence and grace. Ultimately, the spiritual status of the individual is the supreme factor. Highly evolved spirits who have achieved moral mastery and detachment may have their 3 minutes reduced to mere seconds, stepping out of the body with the effortless grace of someone who is fully prepared and consciously commands their own spiritual forces, demonstrating that the only true preparation for death is the consistent moral excellence of life. Following the definitive cut at 3:14, the soul does not enter a void of confusion, but embarks on a structured and necessary period of adaptation in the spiritual plane. Spiritual mentors describe this immediate aftermath as a process involving 3 distinct and vital phases designed to integrate the spirit into its new reality within the first 24 hours. The first phase, recognition, typically lasts for the first 2 hours. The soul is often in a state of shock, akin to waking up from an extremely long, intricate dream, and the primary difficulty is the adjustment to the non-physicality of its new body and surroundings. Spirits, out of pure, long-ingrained habit, may attempt physical actions, reaching for a door handle, trying to converse with living people who cannot see them, or attempting to walk on spiritual ground as if it were solid earth. This is a period of intense learning where the spirit's consciousness slowly assimilates the laws governing its perispiritual body, a vehicle of light and thought, and begins to grasp the profound difference between the material and ethereal existence. The second phase, orientation, spans the next 10 hours from 2 to 12 hours after the cut. This is when the organized spiritual aid arrives in full force. Specialized teams of educators and guides, trained to assist the newly liberated, provide intensive, personalized orientation. These mentors explain the spirit's new condition, patiently answering the torrent of questions that explode in the awakened mind, and begin to articulate the fundamental laws and dynamics that govern this new world. Crucially, it is during this phase that the spirit receives its initial destination information, gaining a preliminary understanding of its immediate future in the spiritual realm. This orientation phase ensures that the spirit's inevitable confusion and fear are systematically replaced by clarity, reassurance, and a sense of belonging to a vast, organized cosmic family, preventing any long-term psychological destabilization. The final phase, direction, concludes the first spiritual day, lasting from 12 to 24 hours. Having been oriented and assessed based on its moral and intellectual state, the spirit is now gently directed to its appropriate spiritual residence. Spiritual teachings emphasize that this is absolutely not a punitive judgment or a geographical assignment of heaven or hell, but a perfectly natural process based solely on vibrational resonance. As the spiritual mentors explain, it is precisely like water naturally finding its own level. The spirit is drawn by an invisible magnetic force to the sphere in the spiritual world that corresponds to its own level of moral and emotional vibration. The humble and loving are drawn to luminous, peaceful regions, while the still troubled, bitter, or heavily materialistic spirits are naturally drawn to darker, heavier spheres where their moral struggles can be addressed. Every spirit is ultimately guided to the location where it can be most useful, most comfortable, and where it can most efficiently continue its evolution without wasted time or energy, ensuring cosmic justice and order. The spiritual revelations concerning the 3 minutes after death are, at their heart, an urgent manual of instruction on how to live the present life, providing the only effective means of guaranteeing a serene and glorious transition. The spiritual masters unequivocally state that the most powerful and singular preparation for death is the continuous spiritual and moral development undertaken during the soul's physical sojourn. A life consistently dedicated to cultivating pure love, practicing unconditional compassion, fostering true forgiveness, and maintaining an unwavering faith in the Creator fundamentally refines the matter of the perispirit, making it lighter and less magnetically attracted to the dense physical body. This refinement ensures that the 3-minute process flows smoothly, effortlessly, and joyously. The greatest enemy of a peaceful transition is fear. The teachings reveal that the paralyzing fear of death is the most destructive obstacle to a serene departure. When the soul is consumed by terror, it clings fiercely to the physical body, violently resisting the natural forces of separation and creating the subjective experience of a turbulent, painful disengagement. When an individual fully assimilates the spiritual truth that death is merely a change of state, the shedding of a temporary costume, and the stepping into a grander, eternal reality, that fear dissolves and the transition becomes an act of sublime courage and conscious progression. This understanding transforms the waiting for death from an anxious dread into a serene anticipation of a glorious homecoming. Furthermore, the practice of prayer and meditation throughout life establishes a direct, secure spiritual link, a powerful line of communication with the spiritual assistants. Souls accustomed to elevating their thoughts and emotions during meditation find it infinitely easier to connect with the loving vibrations of the spiritual guides during the 3 critical minutes. The imperative of forgiveness and reconciliation is also non-negotiable. Spirits who depart with a heart clean of all resentment, malice, and unhealed grudges experience a transition that is luminously light and free. Conversely, clinging to anger and unresolved conflict creates energetic anchors that bind the spirit to the lower, heavier spheres of vibration. Finally, the practice of genuine charity and unconditional love for one's neighbor is the highest form of preparation. Spiritual teachings promise that souls who live a life dedicated to selfless service are received into the spiritual world with magnificent celebrations of light, their 3 minutes becoming a cosmic ceremony of joyous and deserved welcome. The profound spiritual insights regarding the precise mechanism of the 3 minutes following physical death stand as the most crucial gift of knowledge ever transmitted to humanity about the grand transition. This revelation is far more than a source of consolation for the bereaved. It is a powerful engine for personal transformation for those still living. To know with absolute certainty that your consciousness is imperishable, that you are never abandoned in the moment of greatest vulnerability, that spiritual assistance is an organized, guaranteed mechanism of the universe, and that the passage is a meticulously orchestrated event of love and order, must fundamentally revolutionize every aspect of your life and your perception of mortality. The material existence we currently inhabit is unequivocally exposed as a fleeting yet precious and purposeful chance for moral development. Every sunrise offers a new opportunity to prepare for our own 3 minutes, cultivating the virtues of love, forgiveness, and wisdom that will transform the ultimate moment of our lives from a fearful mystery into a conscious, glorious, and serene transition. Death is not the final chapter, but the stunning, illuminating beginning of an infinite journey of discovery, growth, and eternal progress.